Welcome to my classroom. In this fuel cells and batteries course, in past 3 lectures, we have seen what is the need for alternative energy technologies and what is fuel cell and how it is useful, what are the benefits associated with the fuel cells have been discussed in the lecture number 3. Okay, in this lecture number 4, we will discuss about history of fuel cells. So it's going to be interesting to know how this fuel cell was discovered, starting from how batteries or how Voltas have introduced batteries, all that. So we will look into that in detail in this lecture. Okay, ready? History of fuel cells. So we are going to discuss about this history of fuel cells. So these are some of the photographs. Some of them are original and some are diagrams. You can see the Groves fuel cell. And before getting into this history of fuel cells, I would like to bring your attention towards the significance of observation. Why it is important to observe the things that is happening around us, particularly if you are even in a relationship, you have to listen to your partner. Or if you are with parents, you have to listen to your parents what they are speaking. Anybody, if you are with somebody, when they are speaking, you have to observe and listen to what they are speaking, right? So similarly, in research also, it is very important whenever you are performing some experiments, it is very important to observe what is happening. Okay, there is a difference between UG laboratory, practical lab, what we are doing, a standard procedure is given to us and we just observe what is happening in that thing, right? So the results are known, well known what will happen when we perform an experiment in laboratory. Whereas in a research experiment, when we are performing the experiment, we don't know what is going to be the outcome. So it is very important that we observe the things, and there are a lot of hidden secrets there, and also there are a lot of surprises in observing the things. Okay, so particularly in research, there are so many inventions that have come into our mankind and which are very useful to our mankind also, and they have all been an accidental invention. So accidental invention means while observing and expecting something, they could able to observe something different is taking place, and they are able to put into a useful application, and whereby the mankind is being served a purpose. Okay, so that's what we are going to listen now. So the significance of observation, because knowledge is the intellectual manipulation of carefully verified observations. Okay, so we can say somebody is knowledgeable, a person is able to observe and able to analyze, and if you are able to intellectually manipulate the things, we can say a person is having a wisdom and knowledge. Okay, see, whatever observation that we are doing with our nature, it should be diligent, and our reflection should be profound, and our experiment should be exact. So we rarely see these three means combined. That is the diligent, our reflection is profound, and our experiment exact. Okay. So for this reason, the creative geniuses are not common. Okay. So if you are to want to be a genius or you want to be a good, a knowledgeable person, it is important that we carefully observe the things. Okay. So here are some of the list. Some 10 greatest accidental inventions of all time. So whatever you are seeing in this slide, I'll use the pointer. So you can see something here and some X-ray is there, and you have Velcro and you have pacemaker. Okay, so this list, there are a lot of things are there. I'm just listing which are relevant to us. Okay, so the microwave, you know, the microwave oven that we are using nowadays at home also. These microwave reactors are being used in our chemical engineering research, and that is accidentally invented by Percival Spencer. And you know saccharin, how saccharin was invented? So it was invented by Ira Remsen and Konstantin Fallberg, accidentally only. Slinky by Richard James, Play-Doh, Household products. You know super glue, invented by Harry Coover. Teflon, which is being used as a membrane coating, all that. Okay, so that is also Roy Plunkett, invented by Roy Plunkett by accident only. Bakelite, Leo Bakeland. Okay, so that also invented by accident. That means what? Something has happened wrongly, but it has been observed what is happening when that wrong thing is happening. Okay, and similarly, pacemaker was introduced by Wilson Greatbatch in the same way. So I'll just go through some of the important things, one or two as for example. You have Percy Spencer. He's an engineer at Raytheon. After his World War stint in the Navy, he was known as an electronics genius. Okay, so in 1945, Spencer was fiddling with a microwave emitting some magnetron and used in the guts of radar arrays when he felt a strange sensation in his pant. Okay, a sizzling even. Spencer paused and found that a chocolate bar in his pocket had started to melt. So there he find out that microwave radiation of this magnetron, and he invented the microwave oven. Okay, so when you say chocolate, we feel like tasting it also. So you can say that when the person was having the chocolate in his packet and working near this microwave radar thing, so that based on the emissions, he got able to, he sensed that melting has taken place. So that observation helped him to invent the microwave oven. Okay. Next, we are going to discuss about this Alessandro Volta's invention of electric battery in 18th century. It was inspired by some argument over frog's leg. What is that frog's leg? Let us see. Galvani, Galvani series, we know that in electrochemistry you might have seen galvanic series, right? So that Galvani found that the legs of a frog would contract when forming a circuit with two different kinds of metal. So what Galvani did an experiment where he took a frog to two legs, he connected two different metals, like the galvanic series, in the series two dissimilar metals are connected. So what he found is he kept that in legs of the frog, and he contended that this phenomenon has resulted in some animal electricity. He believed some frog as having a fluid which is conducting electricity like that. Okay, so he perceived or he understood that there is an electric fluid present in the frog itself like that. But a voltaic pile, so you can see that a voltaic pile, we named it voltaic, why we will discuss it later. So this photograph shows a voltaic pile used in an early experiment by the Galvani, where we used a frog and we used two dissimilar metals. Okay, so this the experiment he did in early of 18th century. Okay, so but when he listened to what Galvani said, Count Alessandro Volta, he had observed that when two dissimilar metal probes are placed against frog tissue, a weak electric circuit was generated. But Voltaire also did another thing. He could able to reproduce this current outside of a living tissue by placing the metals in certain chemical solutions. Okay, so that's why Volta is one step better than Galvanic. Galvanic felt that it is only the frog which is having some fluid, which is having some magical power, which is producing electricity. Whereas Volta thought that why not it try with some other chemical solutions. Okay, so for this work and his other works with electricity, we are commemorating his name in the measurement of unit of potential. Always we talk about voltage, volt, right? So that name has come from the inventor of this thing, who is Count Alessandro Volta. Okay, because in that argument with Galvani, he disagreed with him. So he have to do, but see, remember to disagree with a big person like Galvani. So he has to prove it, right? It's not like just like that argument we can win over the things like in TV debates, right? So here we have to authentically prove that it is not, because like it's not so like that, right? So he did own experiments that this electric stimulation was ultimately the result of different metals in the circuit and the electrolyte, that is the frog legs between them. That's what he is able to prove. Okay, so what he had done is removing this experiment from the theater of twitching legs. He created twitching legs, means that frog's legs. He removed that all the drama behind it. Okay, so what he did is he created a circuit with two different metals separated by a piece of cloth or cardboard soaked in brine as a salt solution. Okay, so that completed circuit was able to produce electric current. Okay, so what he did, by stacking this element, that is a pair of copper and zinc disc with an electrolyte between them, one on top the other, Volta could able to adjust the amount of electricity that he able to produce to the desired level. Some small millivolt to more level also he is able to do by continuously stacking them. So it's like modular in nature. We can say it is modular in nature. Okay. What is the result? The result of what came to be called as voltaic pile, one of the first devices to provide a reliable source of electricity. Okay, so you can see that in this image, you can see the one of the early voltaic pile. So in this only, electricity was excited by mere contact of conducting substances of different kinds. Okay, so this is also later a voltaic pile El Ferrari Gli Impianto reference. So this image was taken from this reference. So this is again in a different fashion. You could able to put dissimilar metals, okay, and fill the electrolyte in between them, and they are able to produce the electricity. Okay. So if you look at the where he was born, some of the fun facts is like this Volta was born in an Italian town called Lake Como. So in there is a museum there in that lake. Okay, there is a public gardens at this Lake Como. So there is a Voltaino museum where his original voltaic pile design is still in place. So this image shows you that is original design of this voltaic pile. Okay. Also, his face has been featured in the dollars that has been printed there. Okay, currencies. So what he did, Voltaic stacked copper and zinc disc with brine soaked cloth in between them. When he completed the circuit, the stack would be able to produce electric current. So thereby he disproved Galvani that frog is having some magical liquid. Okay, that's where the celebration began. So this was done, as I told you, he could able to get into this invention only because he could able to get into an argument over the frog legs. Okay, as I told you, only after his name we are the unit of measure of electrical potential is you measured, that is volt. Okay, so although this Volta could able to invent what now we are calling it as battery, Benjamin Franklin actually coined the name in 1748 itself. He borrowed the term from military because he has cannon means that you have an array of cannons are there, so he called like a battery of cannons. So that name was being similar to a battery of cannon. So that's how that name as we are calling it now as battery. Okay. So that time he didn't name it like battery. Remember? A little Parthian jar, which is found now in Iraq, which suggests that Volta may have been beaten to the punch by about 2000 years. That's why we call him inventor of the modern battery. Okay. An American William F.M. Gray of GE built some reproductions of this battery which was found from this little Parthian jar. Okay. So when filled with an electrolyte like grape juice, the devices produced about 2 volt. So that way, the new electrolytes have been introduced into the system. When you talk about this Leyden jar is the ancestor of our modern capacitor. Nowadays, we are using capacitors. So this Leyden jar is the ancestor of our modern capacitor. So as the experiment with the electricity progressed through this 18th century, scientists were looking for a better ways to store the electric charge. So what they could do is the insulated conductors could be used to store a charge, but a more compact storage device was greatly desired by them. So that time Ewald von Kleist and Peter van Muskenborg each worked independently, invented a solution in the 1740s. Okay, so they found a solution for it. So they discovered that a glass jar lined with a metal foil on both the inside and outside was capable of holding a significant electric charge. So that's why this device came to be called as Leyden jar by the Mustenborg's colleagues, since the Dutch scientist was at the time teaching at the University of Leiden. Scientists continued to tinker the Leyden jar, but its design and function remained substantially unchanged throughout its useful lifetime. Maybe the most advancement in Leyden jar technology was a simple act of grouping several of them together. Okay, so this Benjamin Franklin compared this assembly to a battery of cannons, thereby coining the term we still use for modern electrochemical cell batteries that power smoke alarm, flashlights, and children's toys. Okay, so this is again a picture where you can see a series of Leyden jars. So coming to 1839, so this is the image of first fuel cell Grove's gas battery. What is that? Actually, Sir William Grove, a British lawyer and an amateur scientist, developed the first fuel cell in 1839. So the principle of discovered again by an accident during an electrolysis experiment. I told you the significance of observation, right? So I started there just to emphasize here. Okay, so the principle, because this observation only helping us to understand what is happening when we do something. Okay, so when Sir William was disconnecting the battery from an electrolyzer and connected the two electrodes together, he observed a current flowing in the opposite direction, and also it is consuming the hydrogen and oxygen gases. So that is where you would able to identify, okay, observe that. So when you are using this hydrogen and oxygen, when you are consuming and you are completing the circuit, you observe that an electricity is passing in, electric current is passing in the opposite direction. Okay, so that's why I always tell this fuel cell and electrolyzer we might have studied in our school itself, right? So electrolyzer means you will have anode, cathode, electrolyte will be there, where we pass the electricity, where electrical energy is converted into chemical energy, right? So when you supply water, water is the raw material, when you supply electric current into it, it produces hydrogen and oxygen, whereas a fuel cell is reverse of it. Okay, we supply hydrogen and oxygen, and we have the circuit is completed, we have electric charges passing through the external circuit. Okay, so the electrons are passing through the external circuit when you have the setup in reverse. Okay, so the reactor is the same, the reaction is forward reaction or backward reaction, tells you whether it is an electrolyzer or a fuel cell. So thereby we are used to the reactor which is used for fuel cell reactor, but we are aware about it in water electrolysis. Okay, so water splitting reaction, water is split into hydrogen and oxygen. Okay, whereas in fuel cell, hydrogen and oxygen combine to produce water as a byproduct, because our primary product here is electricity generation. Got it? Okay. So he called this device, okay, so he named the device as gas battery. Yeah, that time there is no name like fuel cell or even battery. Okay, so he called this device as a gas battery. His gas battery consisted of a platinum electrode placed in the test tubes of hydrogen and oxygen, immersed in a bath of dilute sulfuric acid. Okay, that is a liquid acid solution saturated with hydrogen and oxygen. Okay. So that way it is called as a gas battery, because we are using a two gases, hydrogen and oxygen. So that way it could able to generate a voltage of about 1 voltage. So in 1842, Grove connected a number of gas batteries together in series to form a gas chain. Okay, so by forming that gas chain, it is able to produce more amount of voltage, right? So use the electricity produced on the gas chain to power an electrolyzer reaction to split the water into hydrogen and oxygen. Okay, so that is his application. So you could able to show that, see, I don't need some electricity from outside. I am able to produce electricity from the hydrogen and oxygen, and by doing this thing. Okay, so that's how he could able to demonstrate his invention. So, but there is a problem of corrosion, because he is keeping the anode and the cathode material into sulfuric acid solution, right? So there is instability problem. So it is not a practical. He could able to successfully demonstrate it to the scientist people, the scientific world, but it is not able to do it as a commercial or a practical usage. Okay, so that's why, and many people didn't show interest also in finding, because that time, as I told you, nobody bothered about because we are getting electricity by burning the coal. Okay, so we have all the other ways to produce electricity. So why this much research has to be done in this area? That's why people didn't show much attention towards this invention. Okay, you can see this gas battery how it looked like. It was you could able to produce a voltage as about 1 volt shown in the left. When you do it in series, you can see this, it is used to run the electrolyzer also. Okay, so that's why this photo was courtesy of Berry 2000 textbook. Okay, and significant work on these fuel cells began again in 1930s when World War is taking place. Okay, at that time significant work on fuel cells again have to be started by Francis Bacon, a chemical engineer at Cambridge University, England. In 1950s, Bacon successfully produced the first practical fuel cell, which was an alkaline version. That means the electrolyte is an alkaline one. Okay, so what he did is he used an alkaline electrolyte like molten KOH instead of dilute sulfuric acid, because sulfuric acid we had an issue of corrosion problem. Okay, so the whatever anode cathode all getting corroded, stability issue was there. So that way he started tried with alkaline electrolyte. So these electrodes were constructed of porous sintered nickel powder so that the gases could diffuse through the electrodes to be in contact with the aqueous electrolyte on the other side of the electrolyte. Okay, so that way, so you could able to protect the electrode by making that porous sintered nickel powder. Okay, this greatly increase the contact area required. Remember when you have the rough surfaces kind of thing, so the contact between them, because the adsorption should take place, right? Hydrogen and oxygen should get adsorbed onto the surface, and then that reaction will take place, right? So whatever anode reaction or cathode reaction will take place. Okay, so that way it is helping when you make that kind of rough surface with the porous nature, it increases the contact area between the electrodes, the gases and the electrolyte, so thereby increasing the power density of the fuel cell. In addition, the use of nickel was much less expensive in comparison to the expensive platinum. Remember, platinum obviously is most precious and it's going to be costlier, and but it is more corrosion resistant, right? Gold, platinum, all that in series itself. So that way, but in this he tried, because issue is something was demonstrated and we want to make it publicly, we want it to be available at an affordable price. So instead of using platinum electrode, we prefer to use this less expensive nickel powder electrode, coated electrode. Okay. So what he did is he used alkaline, that is molten KOH. KOH solution was used. So he observed the reaction that is taking place at the anode and the cathode, and overall reaction is same. Hydrogen and oxygen combines to form water. So at the anode, what is happening? We are always applying the hydrogen at the anode. So it releases the electrons, which goes to the external circuit. At that 4 electrons will reach the circuit through the external circuit, it will reach the cathode part, so where oxygen is entering. So oxygen and these electrons and water combine to form OH minus. Okay, so that's what happens in a alkaline fuel cell. So that's what he could able to demonstrate. So you can see this Bacon's laboratory at the Department of Chemical Engineering, Cambridge University in 1955. That time and all everything was bigger in size. Okay. So you can see that fuel cell stack can be seen being assembled on the left of the photograph. So this photography is again courtesy of this University of Cambridge. Actually, for space applications, these fuel cells have some advantages over the conventional batteries, because if they produce several times as much as energy per equivalent per weight with respect to mass. Okay, with respect to weight, they produce more amount of energy, that we have discussed in the previous lecture also. So in comparison to batteries also, in comparison to conventional fossil fuels, fuel cells have the capacity to produce more energy per unit mass. Okay, so that's why the energy density we are talking about. So what happened is in 1960s, these international fuel cells in Windsor, Connecticut developed a fuel cell power plant for the Apollo spacecraft. So because to be used in Apollo spacecraft, they have made the fuel cells. His company, which is in the Winster Connecticut, they produce the international fuel cell power plant. So this plant is located in the service model of the spacecraft, which provided by both electricity, which provides both electricity as well as the drinking water for the people who are traveling in the aircraft spacecraft. Okay, so the astronauts were getting a pure water because it's providing drinking water. It's water, hydrogen and oxygen combines to form water, so that water is pure water. Okay, so they were able to get drinking water, and also this energy production also was done using the water. Okay, water splitting reaction, uh, we produce the things. Okay, so this is the fuel cell which is used in the NASA space shuttle orbiter, one of the 3 fuel cells aboard the space shuttle. So this is the size of the fuel cell. Okay, so these fuel cells provide all the electricity as well as the drinking water when the space shuttle is in the flight. So it almost produced 12 kilowatts of electricity, and its volume is 154 liters. So this photo is again a courtesy of NASA. So this is the actual fuel cell first used in the space shuttle. Remember, they didn't use any alternative energy supplying thing as a backup for this thing. That was the efficiency of the thing which is proven, and that was the trust had on the product that was developed. Okay, so there was no alternative thing, and that's what you can repeat. It could able to supply around 1.5 kilowatts of continuous electrical power. The fuel cell performance during these Apollo missions was exemplary. It was well appreciated because it is able to produce around 10,000 hours of operation, and which are implemented in 18 missions without a accident, single in-flight accidents or incidents. And even in the 1970s, International Fuel Cells developed a more powerful alkaline fuel cells for NASA's Space Shuttle orbiter. So this orbiter uses a 3 fuel cell power plants to supply all the electricity needed during the flight time. And remember, there are no backup batteries on the space shuttle. As such, the fuel cell power plants must be highly reliable. Okay. So remember, these who are the scientists who are all involved in this development of fuel cells and the development of all this. I just list out. The concept of the fuel cell had effectively been demonstrated in the early 19th century by Humphrey Davy, and this was followed by the pioneering work on what were to become fuel cells by scientist Friedrich Combine in 1838. And William Grove is the chemist, physicist, and lawyer, and he is generally credited with inventing the fuel cell in 1839. And he is the one who conducted a series of experiments with what he termed as a gas voltaic battery, which ultimately proved that electric current could be produced from an electrochemical reaction between hydrogen and oxygen over a platinum catalyst. The term fuel cell was first used in 1889 by Charles Langer and Ludwig Mond, who researched fuel cells using coal gas as the fuel. So that is the development. So what William Grove showed was using hydrogen and oxygen directly, pure hydrogen, pure oxygen, but it was very costly, right? So what cheap source of oxygen, hydrogen can be used? For oxygen, we are going to use air anyhow. For hydrogen, what can be done? Okay, anyhow, when you burn fuel, flue gases, they contain hydrogen, right? So they try to use coal gas as a fuel, which contains certain percentage of hydrogen, or biogas is there, right? So everything, whichever contains natural gas or anything, we can make use of them. Okay. And further attempts to convert this coal directly into electricity were made in the early 20th century, but the technology almost remained same. Okay, so in 1932, Cambridge engineering professor Francis Bacon, who modified the Mons and Langer's equipment to develop the first alkaline fuel cell, but it was not until the 1959 that Bacon demonstrated a practical 5 kilowatt fuel cell system. So then there was a increase in attention from the people around the world. So at around the same time, Harry Cole Eric fitted. Remember, unlike this time, we have publications, interaction, international conferences. So what is happening in Europe, what is happening in Russia, what is happening in other parts of USA, all that have not been well communicated that time. because if the mode of travel also not by flight means people have to travel by ship, and it will take a lot of time to reach there, right? Understand, learn the thing. So the interactions were less. We have to understand from that perspective what how these things are done. Because parallelly somebody working in US, and similarly somebody parallelly working in Russia. Remember, Russia had that all the communist thing all the time. So no secrets were out. Whatever scientific inventions were taken place were not known to the outside world also, right? So in that perspective, if you look into what has happened, that around the same time, Harry Collery fitted a modified 15 kilowatt beacon to an Alice Chalmers agricultural tractor, and this Alice Chalmers, in partnership with the US Air Force, subsequently developed a number of fuel cell powered vehicles, including a forklift truck, a golf cart, a submergible vessels, like that, all military applications. Okay. So in the late 50s and early 1960s, NASA, in collaboration with the industrial partners, they began developing the fuel cell generators for manned space missions, and that's how this first PEM fuel cell unit was one of the result of this kind of missions. And William Thomas Group at the GE credited with the invention, as we discussed. Another GE researcher called Leonard Neidrak, he refined the group's PEM fuel cell by using platinum as a catalyst on the membranes. So the Grub Nitrax fuel cell was further developed in cooperation with NASA and was used in the Gemini space program in the mid 90s, as shown above. Okay. So these international fuel cells, they are able to produce a 1.5 kilowatt alkaline fuel cell for use in the Apollo space missions. They will able to provide electric power as well as drinking water for the astronauts for the duration of their missions. IFC subsequently able to produce 12 kilowatt alkaline fuel cells, which is used to provide onboard power on all the space shuttles flights. While research was continued on this fuel cell in the Western countries, in the Soviet Union, fuel cells were being developed for the military applications. Although much of this early work is still secret, it did result in fuel cells being used to provide onboard power to a submarine and later to the Soviets' manned space programs. So this is a timeline where in 1801, Humphrey Davy demonstrated the principle of what became fuel cells. In 1839, William Grove invents the gas battery, the first fuel cell. And 1889, Charles Langer and Ludwig Mond developed the Grove's invention and named it as fuel cell. In 1950s, General Electric Motors invents the proton exchange membrane fuel cell. And in 1959, Francis Bacon demonstrates a 5 kilowatt alkaline fuel cell. 1960s, NASA first uses the fuel cells in the space missions. The 1970s, the oil crisis prompts the development of alternative energy technologies, including phosphoric acid fuel cells. In 1980s, US Navy uses fuel cells in submarines. So large stationary fuel cells are developed for commercial and industrial locations in 1990s. And 2007, fuel cells begin to be sold commercially as a APU and for stationary backup power. And 2008, Honda begins leasing the FCX Clarity fuel cell electric vehicle. 2009 onwards, residential fuel cell micro CHP units became commercially available in Japan, and also thousands of portable fuel cell battery chargers are sold in the market. So that is the development happened. So this is again a table summary shown here. So it's taken from one of my friend's PhD thesis from IIT Madras. So you can see the history summarized in this single chart, whatever we have discussed so far. Okay. So later what happened? So with the time, we could able to see that there is a theoretical performance of the fuel cell was proven by Ostwald, and Bacon begins to do research in alkaline fuel cell. Then Teflon was used in the membranes. Okay. So then there is a sulfonated polystyrene ion exchange membrane developed by Grubbs in 1955, and solid oxide fuel cell was demonstrated in 1959 by Central Technical Institute in Netherlands. And in 1961, Elmore published their experiment with a phosphoric acid fuel cell. 90s, NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory and University of Southern of California developed the first direct methanol fuel cell. Remember, apart from hydrogen being used as a fuel, first time this direct methanol fuel cell was developed in 1990s. Even 2007, as I told you, Honda announces its first mass production of fuel cell cars, FCX Clarity model. Okay, so this is the one of the condensed history along with the progress in the development of fuel cell technology. And if you're coming back to batteries, sir, fuel cells history, we have understood. What about batteries, sir? Battery also, initially what was the size of the battery? Nowadays, pen batteries, pencil batteries have come into picture. What is the history that has behind the batteries? You know what? The amount of energy it takes to manufacture either a single use or a disposable battery or a rechargeable battery equals to around 50 times more than the actual energy that is delivered by a battery. So this is yet another reason why these products tend to cost much more and what many would assume to pay. Okay, so the process is simple and there are very specific standards for efficiency and safety in place that makes battery creation time consuming and costly. So Thomas Edison produced a nickel ion battery in 19th century. It's popular in European mining operations and railway vehicles because the lighting was an issue in the mines. So we made this nickel ion battery that time. So wondering, have you seen what are the different type of battery which we are using nowadays? There are battery like AA. If you buy any battery from the market, no, you open your charger, TV remote, you remove and see the battery. What is written on that double A or triple A, C and D batteries, and you will not see any B battery there. Okay, they are not really needed anymore. Actually, earlier there used to be B type battery, so we'll look into that in detail. So these batteries were used in early model laptop battery packs and some hobby battery packs. B batteries are still sometimes used in Europe for lanterns and bicycle lamps. According to Energizer company, though their popularity is dwindling there too, they might be completely discontinued. Okay. So in 1924, industry and government representative met again to figure out a naming system for all the cells and batteries they had just standardized. So they decided to base it around the alphabets like A. So for all those batteries, they just wanted to standardize. So around the alphabets, like dubbing the smallest single cell battery as A, and went from there to A, B, C, D, and there was also no six battery, number six battery. There is also a number 6 battery that was larger than the others and pretty commonly used, so it was grandfathered in without a name change. Okay, as battery technology changed and improved and new sizes of battery was made, they were added to the naming system. So after completing that, when smaller batteries came along, they were designated as AA, triple A kind of thing. These newer batteries were the right size for the growing consumer electronic equipment because we know all the size of the all electronic equipments have come down, right? The size has reduced, so the battery need also has to be reduced, right? So that's where a lot of research has taken place, and we have a different size of battery, which is smaller in size, also came into picture. So they caught on. C and D batteries also found in niche in medium and high drain applications. The mid-size A and B batteries simply did not have bad market and more or less disappeared in the United States. So you can see some of the olden day batteries. You can see the size number 6. When they say told you sixth generation, they made a 6 batteries together. The long life number 6. It is called as number 6 itself. So you can see some of the batteries here. There is a quadruple A battery, that is 4 batteries together. Okay, 42.5 mm long and 8.3 mm in diameter. The alkaline cell weighs around 6.5 grams and they are able to produce around 1.5 volt. Okay, so they put several batteries together into one tin. So they used to produce voltage here. You can see these all alkaline things. Okay, so these are different type of model batteries, which we even nowadays we are using this type of batteries, right? So you just be curious enough hereafter whenever you take any battery or observe, no? You see what is the battery size and whether it is A battery, AA or triple A, and try to know what is the difference between them. Okay, and still the kind of micrometer, what do you call millimeter, some of the radios we still use this type of batteries also. Okay, So now if you have 6 batteries in series, you can connect like this and they are using it. Okay, so that's why when they combine together, they are able to look bigger size like this. So when you open this type of batteries, you're able to see they are connected to each other to give the record thing. Okay, so this is the 9 volt battery which reveals that 6, because each one can produce 1.25. So you are going to have a number of batteries connected, right? So the opening of a 9 volt battery to reveal 6 LR61 battery cells which are similar to tetra batteries, 4S batteries. Okay, so that way this type of batteries, 6 batteries are connected together to form one 9 volt battery. So that is how the batteries have come. So if you take your TV remote, I used to give it as an assignment to students. Please open your TV remote and check what is the what type of battery is there in your mobile, whether it is AA or AAA battery. You can see that. Okay, even if you go to any shopping mall to buy battery for your shaver or any automatic things, electronic gadgets, you will see the batteries. You can hereafter you will look to see how many A's are written on it, what is the size. Instead of saying pencil battery, this is like motor battery, radio battery, like that, you can see the size names: AA battery, AAA battery, or tetra A batteries. Okay, so that's why we as a better electrochemical person, we should able to name the batteries. Okay, so here also some of the flat batteries came into picture, because with the invention of all flat electronic things, the battery shapes have also changed. Okay, so they have different names. And remember, battery has another name. Battery is also called as voltaic cell. Battery is also called as voltaic cell. So that is a group of cells are used to provide higher voltage. As I shown you, 6 batteries together can give you a 9 volt. So in 1798, Alessandro Volta only invented the battery. It was invented before the electric generator. So in 1836, rechargeable battery made of lead acid was invented by a chemist from England. In 6 most popular batteries are till now lead acid, alkaline batteries, okay, NiMH batteries, nickel cadmium batteries, lithium ion batteries, and lithium PO batteries. Okay, they can create continuous flow of DC current electricity until all the energy is utilized, and there is no mechanical movement is involved in the creating the energy. Because if you see it steam, hydraulic, what you call hydropower plant or other power plant, there will be a big turbine rotating part is there, fluid water is coming or steam is coming and falling on the rotating blade, which makes generate electricity, right? So that kind of nothing is there. The simple take chemical anode cathode is there. So whenever you want to discharge, it will convert chemical energy into electrical energy. That simple way, see, these batteries used to work. So that way they are little greener, they don't release any energy when you are using. Say for example, in a function there is a power cut, when you use a battery, there is no noise there, there is no pollution creating toxic emissions there. Whereas when you start using a diesel generator, the generator will be running with a huge noise and it will release COX, NOx emissions, right? So all SOx, NOx emissions are associated, right? Even some 175 years old battery powered bell, school bell, is there in a Oxford University, which is continuously ringing for over 175 years. Maybe the sound might have reduced, but still it is working. And nobody till now have opened it to see what that battery is made up of. They don't want to take the device apart in order to figure it out also. So it is optimal for your lithium ion smartphone batteries to top it off and keep it charging between 40 to 80 percentage. So always you try to keep your battery charge in your mobile phones or laptop to minimum of 40%, and when it's 80%, rather than letting it drain 0 percentage and charging it all the way up. Okay, so never use your mobile phones to less than 40%. If you are at home or having the facility to charge it using your power bank also, once it goes below 40%, recharge it. That way, that is one of the way to increase the life of your battery. Okay, particularly lithium ion battery. Okay, so that is the optimum way to use it. Nowadays, there is rechargeable batteries have come into picture. Earlier days, we used to, even now we are doing the same. When you buy a battery, if it is 10 rupees, we'll use it 2 3 months. We'll remove it from the wall clock or from our remote and throw it away. Then came this rechargeable battery. you can charge it and reuse it. Okay, so you should have a charger also for the battery charger. So the first rechargeable battery was invented in this 1859 by a French guy called Gaston Plante. So this first version was a spiral roll of 2 sheets of pure lead separated by a linen cloth in a glass jar of sulfuric acid solution. Remember how difficult it to handle that sulfuric acid solution. Okay, so then plant's battery is similar to lead acid battery that starts our car nowadays. Okay, so this is the bell which I was talking about in Oxford school. There is a bell for over 170 years. The Oxford electric bell, which is known as Clarendon dry pile, has been chiming almost continuously. This was constructed by an instrument maker called Watkin and Hill, and it was purchased by a professor called Reverend Robert Walker. So Robert Walker purchased from an instrument maker. He ordered, "I want a bell, please make it for me." So they made a bell with a battery setup, so that no external, no manual belling, no manually we have to ring it. Okay, so that is the bell which was made. That means you think about the material they might have used to. They are just a maker of instrument maker. Okay, so they did something and they made a battery and which is still working without any recharge. Okay, so the composition of its power source is uncertain. Currently it is still located in this place, same place. The bell is an experiment. They kept it inside a box, so that means the sound may not be coming out of the box, but the bell is an experiment. It's consisting of 2 brass bells, each stationed beneath a battery, a dry pile battery, with a metal spear or a clapper swinging between them to produce a ring that has occurred on the order of 10 billion times. 10 billion times it has given the ring, but still it is working. So it is similar to Zamboni piles, an early electric battery invented by Zamboni in 18th century. Okay, so this bell is called Oxford electric bell. And when we talk about this battery, there are different type of battery, and we have to compare the performance between the fuel cells and the batteries. So you can see that here. So if you consider the energy storage system volume per liters, so if you range how much kilometer it can travel. Okay, so for example, they can have more how much liters versus how much miles you can go. Okay, so you can easily see that fuel cells with a hydrogen tank of 35 megapascal pressure, it can go up to 400 miles with a low energy of 300 liters volume. Okay, whereas if it is a battery, you can see you can have, it needs more volume to travel even 100 miles. Okay, so that is the advantage of this fuel cells over batteries. So nowadays there is improvement is done in the battery, right? Lead acid batteries were there, nickel batteries were there, now lithium ion batteries which are more efficient than the rest, which is giving a tough fight to this fuel cell up to a 150 kilometer range. Okay, so because you can see the performance is almost same, the volume, it's a liters, volume in liters is around 220, fuel cell is also around less than almost 195, right? And for a kilometer range of 150, the performance is close to each other, right? So remember, this 35 megapascal hydrogen tank refers to 5,000 pounds per square inch pressure, whereas the 70 megapascal refers to 10,000 pounds per square inch. Okay. So if we compare the performance of different batteries which have been introduced in this market, we have alkaline batteries, zinc carbon batteries, lithium batteries, lithium thionyl batteries, zinc air batteries, like that. Okay, so you can see the energy density here in megajoules per kg. Alkaline batteries 0.5 megajoules per kg, zinc carbon 0.13 megajoules per kg, and you can see zinc air having 1.69 megajoules per kg. So each type of battery will have a different construction. Okay, you can see anode is made up of zinc, lithium, or zinc in all these batteries, whereas cathode is manganese oxide or sulfur oxide, oxygen, chlorine, or oxygen. Okay, so here you can see special characteristics for each one of the batteries, and for different batteries we have self discharge. Even when you use it or not use it, what is the self discharge percentage? It varies. Okay, so zinc air batteries, the self-discharge is more. First 1 month, 30% is released when it is unsealed. Okay. Whereas alkaline batteries, it is very low, 0.5% is the self-discharge. And whether they are memory, deep discharge can repair or what, whether they are rechargeable type of battery or not, whether when you are disposing it, whether it is recyclable or not, based on the model, different type of model, what sizes are available are listed in this table. So particularly when we compare the capacitors, electrochemical capacitors, batteries and fuel cells, how they differ in energy density is per unit mass, how much whatever it can give versus power density is the measuring parameter. Okay, so you can see that energy density is very high and the power density is low for fuel cells in comparison to batteries, electrochemical capacitors and capacitors. Okay, so the energy density is as volumetric energy density among various type of batteries. We can see, as I told you, lithium ion batteries, with the introduction of some polymers into it, they are able to have more gravimetric energy density versus volumetric energy density. Okay, so this image is again credits to NASA. The same figure in different perspective. So here it is gravimetric energy density in whatever per kg. In terms of volumetric energy density, whatever per liters, you can see lithium ion battery is way higher. So what we should know is, if we are saying specific energy density is increasing, means it's lighter weight. If your volumetric energy density is increasing, it is smaller in size. Okay, so that way lithium ion batteries is lightweight and smaller in size in comparison to the lead acid batteries. Okay, that's what we should infer from it. So this again the specifications by battery. So based on the different voltage, how much it can give, you can see lead acid batteries voltage. Lead acid batteries were able to give a voltage of around 2 volt, and lithium ion batteries are able to produce higher voltage. When you use cobalt, manganese or phosphate, they are able to produce 3.6 volt, 3.8 volt and 3.3 voltage. Okay, and the discharge is life cycle is around 200 to 300 for lead acid batteries, whereas lithium ion they are around 500 to 1000 if it is cobalt, or 1000 to 2000 when it is phosphate. Okay, so you can see the other parameters, and toxicity involved around this lead acid battery is reduced. That is the main reason this lithium ion became more popular. Lead is very toxic in nature, so that way the toxicity was very high when we are using this lead acid batteries, whereas these lithium ion batteries, the risk involved is low with respect to toxicity. Okay, so but however these lead acid based batteries are thermally stable, and here when you are using lithium ion batteries, a protection circuit is mandatory to ensure the safety. Okay, and discharge temperature is given here. And with respect to maintenance, lithium ion batteries needed a very less requirement of any maintenance, whereas lead acid battery need a topping charge for every 3 to 6 months. So if you compare the performance of lead acid batteries and nickel metal hydride batteries, so the theoretic specific energy you can compare, and you can see the temperature range in which they are being applied, and what is the energy density. We are concerned about this energy density, watt hour per liter per with respect to volumetric. You can say it is 125 to 182 if it is lead acid batteries, and we are having nickel metal hydride batteries 130 to 300 watt hour per liters. Okay, well, so that's the history which I wanted to discuss in between these fuel cells and batteries. So we'll watch a video, and in which it is quickly summarized whatever I have discussed in this 1 hour of lecture. Okay,
so what would it take to start using hydrogen as energy? In 1839, William Robert Grove of Great Britain's Royal Institution had an idea of reversing electrolysis of water to create electricity. Based on this hypothesis, he developed the first fuel cell, producing safe and clean electric energy. Later in 1939, Francis Bacon of Cambridge University installed this fuel cell into a forklift and successfully conducted a test drive. The first person to invent a fuel cell electric vehicle was Austrian scientist Karl Kordesch in the 1950s. After World War II, he came to America and remodeled a used car into a fuel cell electric vehicle. In the 1960s, American carmaker General Motors hired 200 researchers and designed a van based on Kordesch's fuel cell. However, this vehicle could only seat 2 people in the front, while the back seat was packed with a fuel cell system.
So it should let us know that the fact that time everything was larger in size. Okay, so that way it would the vehicle that they made can only accommodate 2 people, because most of the space is occupied by the equipment itself.
Around the same time, active research into hydrogen vehicles was also carried out in Europe. German automaker Daimler-Benz ambitiously released a fuel cell electric bus. They developed the bus because the fuel cell system was simply too big for a sedan. Then in 1999, Benz released a compact car installed with small fuel cells. And Jürgen Schreck, then CEO of Daimler-Benz, said with confidence, "Today, the race to develop the fuel cell car is over. Now, we begin the race to lower the cost." Japan also plays a major part in the history of fuel cell electric vehicle development. Although they were late in the race compared to American and European car makers, Toyota presented several fuel cell electric vehicles and was second in the world to release a mass-produced fuel cell electric car. Now, Japan is following a hydrogen economy roadmap to develop not only passenger cars, but also trucks, buses, and forklifts that use hydrogen as fuel.
Even in India, we have made a hydrogen roadmap, which we are going to discuss in the later part of the course.
So what about South Korea? Hyundai Motor Company began making fuel cell electric vehicles about 20 years ago. In 2005, 7 years into development, Hyundai succeeded in creating Korean-made fuel cells. In 2013, Hyundai took the industry by surprise by launching the world's first mass-produced fuel cell electric car and exported it to 18 countries, including several in Europe. In 2018, Hyundai released hydrogen-powered Nexo, which can travel 609 kilometers on a 5-minute charge, the longest range in the world. Also, it surpassed records set by Japan's fuel cell electric vehicles in terms of maximum speed, acceleration, and motor torque, further proving Hyundai's world-class capability in hydrogen technology. In 2018, Benz released GLC F-Cell, a fuel cell-operated plug-in hybrid. In September 2019, BMW launched Hydrogen Next. In 2020, Toyota plans to release a new fuel cell electric vehicle. Hyundai is also equipped to manufacture over 10,000 fuel cell electric vehicles in 2020. The entire world is jumping into the competition for fuel cell electric car domination. South Korea has become a leader in eco-friendly vehicles and is positioned to lead the world market. By 2030, all car models in South Korea will be eco-friendly, using the world's top technologies. In summary, hydrogen was discovered and developed through the hard work of countless scientists. And now it is being used as a sustainable energy source for cars and other vehicles essential to daily life.
Well, in this lecture number 4, we have discussed about the history of fuel cells and a demonstration video of what are the recent developments in developing electric cars, electric vehicles using hydrogen fuel cells have been shown in the video. So you should be able to Google and be able to list at least what are the different modern variety brands of car, different brands versus model in which they are using hydrogen as the hydrogen fuel cell as the power source. Okay, so that we should do it as an assignment. Thank you so much for joining my classroom. Meet you in the next lecture. Bye bye.